Okay, hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to another NFPA podcast. This is Christian James, and we have a fantastic guest here with us today, Sean Mitzel. Sean's had the opportunity to learn a variety of different skills from all of his different operations in the military, which is pretty cool. So he's an expert in permaculture, and he learned this from Jeff Lawton. Permaculture design, methods of design, pattern understanding, climatic factors, water, aquaculture, soils, earthworks, and various different strategies for how to make properties more resilient and productive. He, along with his family, are now raising dairy goats, sheep, pigs, rabbits, chickens, and ducks, the whole 9 yards, along with planting over 200 productive trees and support species, wildcrafting, propagating mushrooms, raising and training livestock, guardian dogs, herding dogs, etc. That is a mouthful, but here he is, Sean Mitzel. Did you want to just talk a little bit more in detail about your background? So you were in the military. You lived in Japan for a good while, as I understand it. And I'm just kind of curious. The first question for me is, from all your background and experience, what taught you the most? Was it from the military or from somewhere else in terms of preparedness and what to get ready for? And then why did you choose to move to the American Redoubt over, let's say, Thailand or Malaysia or somewhere else in the world?
Yeah, no, those are great questions, and I'd be happy to talk about it. And we have to be careful here because we could go on and on for hours and hours on that topic. So I'm going to be brief. Now, I want to start with why I moved to the American Redoubt, or Northern Idaho in this case. Now, there's a lot of reasons. The chief among them is liberty. And that is really, in one word, why we moved here. Now, I have to clarify and say that Idaho's not perfect, and Idaho has its issues. Believe it or not. I mean, I talk to people all the time, and they say, "Well, we want to come to Idaho because it's the last bastion of freedom," and in many ways it is. But we definitely have our problems, and we need to be guarded to be able to stave off statism, because we even have that here in the lovely Idaho. Now, to get to your question real quickly about military, what was the driving factor behind my preparedness journey, I guess, or what prepared me for preparedness, I guess you would say. Certainly the military was a big part of that, no doubt about it. I spent 24 years in the Marine Corps, so that definitely played a factor. I'll just say it, seeing the depravity of man and across the globe, and just to be able to witness the fruits of our foreign policy, which are not good, and many other factors, many interests, and just kind of seeing the way things are going led me to a point where I thought, you know what, being a preparedness-minded person seems very prudent to me. So I'll leave that there unless you have a follow-up question.
No, that's great. I appreciate that. Well, it's kind of funny. We were actually just talking about this here at the office a few minutes ago about, is it really better to live in a place like the American Redoubt in America versus, some like remote island in the Caribbean or somewhere else, and just survive out there, or find some like expat, culture down in Argentina or somewhere else, which I've done a lot of research into as well personally. And I decided to move up here as well too, for many reasons. I feel like overall it's the best place to be. But maybe you could speak to this a bit more, because I am curious. I'm sure other people are, because they are looking at all the different options. And if somebody has a little bit of money and they're looking to, get their family to a safe place, maybe they do want to go to some place overseas. They feel like that is the best route. But maybe you can provide some insight on that. Do you feel like Americans will really be safe in a different country or some small island if things totally do just collapse worldwide? Or do you feel like maybe the indigenous populations will turn on the Americans because of a lot of the things, like you said, the foreign policy that we've been pushing for generations now? I mean, what are your thoughts on that overall?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. In fact, I know a lot of people who have decided to become expats, and whether it's Thailand or Costa Rica or many other places, and you've probably done lots of study, and you could study things like strategic relocation and find many places overseas. Now we chose North Idaho because we have a strong a strong calling here as far as family, as far as what we're trying to do. We're trying to get back to first principles here in America. We have hope for that. I mean, it's not looking good, but there's always some hope. So we really chose that over. It really wasn't even a question. I mean, I did just maybe in a glancing way think about some of those other places, but I really didn't take it too seriously because I don't think you're going to find any safe haven out there that's 100%. Right now Costa Rica is popular for people to go to for various reasons. A lot of Americans move to Costa Rica, and I think there's just as much risk there as there is here. In fact, I think there's less here. Whether or not the indigenous population is going to turn on them, if there's some type of collapse, people turn on people in general, whether they're Americans or not. If they perceive them to have stuff and they don't have it, well, then it really doesn't matter your nationality, I guess.
That's a good point.
So it sounds like you chose this area not just for the geography, climate, farming, things like that, but you had connections here, you had a people here, and that played a big part in why you want to be here. Because I'm always curious. A lot of people come out here and they say, "Oh, this is great. I love the mountains. I love the varied weather. It's beautiful." And I'm curious, how much of that versus just being around like-minded people and enjoying that sort of level of comfort of knowing that you're surrounded by people that are all on sort of the same page.
Yeah, no, I mean, my wife and I grew up in Washington State, so we're right next door here, and we wanted to be relatively close to family, and so we have family in Washington and Oregon and different places around here, not right here, but we wanted to be close, and yet I could not move back to Washington State or even Oregon. Even in the eastern portions, I just couldn't do it. I wanted the liberty that is ingrained here in Idaho. With all of its problems, with all of its struggles as well. Again, like I said before, a lot of people think Idaho's great, you can do anything you want. Well, I mean, people do anything they want in many cases,
right.
but all those laws and regulations are in place, and so for us, we wanted close proximity to family, and we have that. But we wanted the lifestyle of Northern Idaho, and like you mentioned before, we like many of the other factors: climate, the ability to grow food and raise animals, and those kinds of things, and enjoy the liberties of. And we did a lot of research, and this kind of came out on top. So that's kind of why we're here.
I've often heard this described as the least worst place. It's not a very positive sounding phrase, but it's kind of accurate. I mean, for ourselves, that's how we did it. We just kind of looked at the world as a blank slate, narrowed it down to, okay, we'll stay in America, narrowed it down to traveled around, and finally everything was whittled away until the only thing left was Boundary County. And it was,
right.
I meet so many people that tell me the same thing every week. I'm meeting people that are coming in from different parts of the country, and a lot of them seem to have this sort of calling, which is very interesting. Like how did they arbitrarily pick this place out of nowhere? Of course, a lot of them did their research, but it seems like they've all gone through that process where they've reduced it down to the least worst place left
Yeah.
in America.
That's right.
That's it. It's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, Sean, have you heard of, I think it's Alturas, California. It's a super rural area up in the northern right-hand corner of the state, and it's just, you just drive through hundreds of miles of nothing to get there. Like literally desert wastelands, and this is little wonderful farming town, and it's still very dry there, not a whole lot of water, but it's a very, very small community. We were planning on moving my family up there, and bringing the whole crew up, and we felt like that was the best place to be, and yet, like Lance said, we still found this like calling that kept reaching all of us, and we ended up here. It's kind of a funny story, but a lot of people, like you said, they do feel that, and end up here. So it's interesting.
Yeah, that's in isn't that in Jefferson territory up there?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Correct, yeah. Jefferson State, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Sean, now that you're here, now that we're all here, other people moving here, is this the last stand, or is there always the sensibility, the practical side of a bug out plan? Like, hey, things really start going bad, maybe we'll bail to Costa Rica. I mean, how practical is it to go to a different place or leave this place, or is it best just to, whatever happens, economic gradual downturn, just like has been going on for the past, however many decades you want to count, or if something catastrophic happens, are we best just sticking it out here together, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I think you have to approach it both from a macro and a micro level. And on the macro level, on whether or not there is an overall bug out plan, like if it gets really bad in Idaho, I'm going to run off to Costa Rica or the Northern Territories in Canada. I don't think so, honestly. I'm putting roots down here, and this is where I'm making my stand, if you will, if that's a way to put it. Now, on the micro level, it's interesting the way you went with that question, because just last summer when we had that drought and it was really dry, we had a forest fire start within a half a mile of our property. And in fact, Monica and I were on the road. We were away from the property, and our kids were home, and this forest fire started. And if you guys, I know it was very dry last year, and those things can move very fast, and that could have been an extremely bad situation. The bottom line is that we talked to them briefly on the phone. We had talked about these types of things before we even left, and they were within 15 minutes they were gone off the property. Okay, so that's a real bug out plan on the micro level that always needs to be considered for all of us in all places.
Yeah, we have so many friends that had to, bug out intra-county. They didn't go too far, but
right.
How realistic is it to make one's homestead resilient in that sense? I mean, obviously, trimming trees around your house, keeping your forest, your woods clean, but if it's a big area that's burning up, is that just one of those things where people might have to travel some distance away from their property, or could they possibly stay there if they prepared their forest and made it resilient to fire?
Well, I think the reality is here in northern Idaho, excuse me, is that you can have fire breaks, you can do firewise, you can have 200 feet of defensible space, you can implement all these strategies, but if a fire is burning hot enough, it's coming down on you. I mean, that's just the reality of wildland fires in the Northwest. And any forester, any your wildfire crews will tell you this. Yes, it is very wise to do those things, and we should create defensible space. We should make sure we're thinning appropriately to keep those ladder fuels down as much as possible. But the reality is that if it's a hot enough fire, it can jump. I mean, we have fires jump over vast rivers. Fires jump in suburban neighborhoods. There on some level you have to have a contingency plan to go. And we always think in these terms. I basically have I call it a primary, secondary, and a tertiary plan. Okay, so my primary bug out plan might be a mile and a half down the road to my neighbor's house while the crews are fighting fires near my house. A secondary plan might be more of a regional thing where last year there was smoke covering all of North Idaho and eastern Washington, and some people who are having respiratory problems, they had to leave and go to central Montana or western Washington. Even over there was fires burning. So that might be considered a secondary, and a tertiary might be like, hey, there's a regional disaster. I mean, if Hanford or something like that were to go, or maybe you need to go to North Dakota. I don't know, something. But these are all the things that we need to be thinking through. for our properties, and even here in North Idaho with water.
So there's no sure thing. We all have to be prepared for even casual acts of nature.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's just the reality of it, And I always tell people, I get into these discussions a lot, and I enjoy them. It's really fun. But they're like, oh yeah, well, what about this? What about the EMP? And I'm like, well, are you prepared for a job loss? Are you prepared for a wildland fire? Are you prepared for not getting as much money from your next paycheck than you were? Do you know what I'm saying? It's
right. Yeah.
We have to we can't jump to the extreme things that could happen. Of course, they're always possible. When we're not even prepared to leave our home in 15 minutes if there's a fire that starts a half mile away.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, that's a great point. People have to address the basic things before they start worrying about alien invasions and all sorts of
right
stuff that probably is not going to happen in our lifetime, but
right.
Couldn't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Along those lines, obviously, so we can't be prepared for everything all the time. We do the best we can, but as far as your homestead setup and the off-grid lifestyle, the homestead lifestyle that so many people aspire to, moving out to the redoubt or wherever it is they might move to, how realistic is it to be 100%? I mean, how dependent are we always going to be on fuel for tractors or fuel for vehicles to travel to buy stuff and upkeep of technology, even though we might have the sweetest solar system ever or whatever the case might be? How self-sufficient can one truly be out here or anywhere?
Great question, and this is something that people really need to think through, because what I tell people is, I don't even think you should plan for 100% self-sufficiency, or when I say yes, we need to work towards self-sufficiency. What I really mean by that is within a community, and not necessarily you and your neighbor, although that would be great. But a community of like-minded people, so you develop a network that obviously has to be somewhat close to you, where you're developing self-sufficiency. Let me give you an example. One of our goals here on the Prepared Homestead is we want to derive 80% of our caloric needs from the land. Okay, so 80% of all of our needs for our family from our property. Now, we're not there yet. We're actually over 50% though. I mean, which is a significant accomplishment.
Right.
And that's not just because it's the middle of summer right now. That this from now on. I mean, so food preservation is a big part of our plan. But the reality is that the level of self-sufficiency that you do have really is the level of freedom that you enjoy. And so I do encourage people to work towards self-sufficiency. And in fact, that's one of our real mission, is to make people self-sufficient and their properties abundant. But the reality is you're not shooting for 100%. I think that self-sufficiency is within a community. And so, yeah, you're right. I mean, we're still somewhat dependent on the feed store, and we're working on changing that. We're planting forage crops and things like that, and we want to reduce that as much as we can. And there is some level. I mean, the density of animals that we have on our property right now, I could not sustain if the feed store went away. Now, what I could sustain is some level of animals on the property, and so I would have to cull my herds and flocks down to a level that I could sustain, and it would be significantly less than what we have. Okay, so all these things need to be thought out and understood, and it's important, kind of like what you're talking about, to define, first of all, what does that mean? What does it mean to be self-sufficient? Because a lot of people say, oh yeah, I'm totally self-sufficient, but the reality is that, yeah, as long as the feed store and Costco's there, yes, they're self-sufficient.
Gas stations are open.
Right.
So you're kind of describing a traditional village, really. People help each other, and people keep everything local and trade amongst one another, whereas you can't just do it on yourself. You really need to have other people working around you.
Absolutely. In fact, localism or eating local, shopping local, all those things, that is so much more than just a kind of a crunchy granola nut thing to do. That is like the core of a preparedness in a community is much more resilient, one that has a very strong local economy. I mean, that's what we should be shooting for. We really should be focusing in on that and, creating local economies, local products, shopping locally. And again, not just because it's, a trendy thing to do, because it builds resiliency in communities.
No, you're right. It does. In fact, that's a great point. We talk about how not only do you want to prepare going forward and have enough food, enough animals, and enough resiliency on your property in terms of water and energy and everything else to take care of yourself as much as you can, but talking about what are your skills that you're going to bring into the new economy that you can contribute to the village, if you will, working together. So you might have a farmer that's able to produce and solely focuses primarily on developing as much, chicken feed or feed for your hogs or whatever else as possible to then go out there and trade that in the community for somebody else who's a local shoemaker. You don't know what it would be.
Right.
I mean, that's where the power comes into. I think you're really right about that is so, if you're living in a city right now, if you can even, get out of that by 30 or 40 miles and move to a place where you have some semblance of that local community of people being able to take some of these different skills, take some of these different assets, and be able to trade and barter and help each other out. That's going to, you're going to fare far better than if you're in the city trying to stock up on just stuff from Costco or from wherever else. And so that really is an excellent point.
Yeah, that for sure.
Something I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit and just sort of parrots a lot of the negative comments that I'll often hear from people, or you read in posts or people discussing being self-sufficient. And a lot of times you'll hear people say, well, why would I do that? I have a good career, I can make a lot of money, I can buy all the stuff I need. And it sounds like it's really time consuming, and somebody couldn't really be 100% self-sufficient anyway, so why bother? Just some of the questions or some of the statements that I hear that people try to use to bring down the whole idea. So what are the real positive benefits? I mean, obviously we're going to get a higher quality of food and a nicer lifestyle in the countryside, but maybe you could elaborate, like what real joy is it that you find that keeps you on the homestead, that you like this lifestyle?
Well, I think it was, and I'm going to butcher the quote, it was Wendell Berry who said something to the effect of the degree to which a man, and you can say a family or a community, you can put in there as well, that can provide for its own needs is the degree to which that person, family, community is free. Okay, so there is a level of freedom that no job, no six-figure salary from a corporate office can replace. Okay, now they may feel free because they're free to buy lots of things, but again, we don't get our joy from things. We get great joy from a self-sufficient. I say again, I couch that, and you guys understand now what I'm saying. I'm not saying we are 100% self-sufficient in a self-sufficient lifestyle. Right. Certainly, you brought it up. I mean, the nutrient density of food alone, if you even remotely care about health, is a huge factor. I mean, there's a massive difference between the tomatoes that we're pulling off our plants right now, and as in today, and pulling them off right when they're ripe, and then using them right away, or in many cases are going to be canning them, and that nutrient density is much higher than what we're getting at the grocery store. And so there's that level of aspect. And I personally really enjoy the freedom that it brings. That's probably the number one thing for me.
From the rat race is worth it just in and of itself, huh?
Yes. Now, at the same time, it's a tough lifestyle. I mean, this is not easy, and I see this a lot. A lot of people, they love the idea of this, but they don't, once they start doing all the work of this.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's kind of like, whoa, okay.
But it's but it's fun too. I mean, we do this because, boy, this is a lot more fun than working all over your desk all day long at some job you might like. At least you're out there, in the sun, working your land and deriving something, and it's not just the end in itself. You're not doing it just for the food. You're doing it for the experience of life. You're a part of life. You're living the good old times right then and there.
Right. It's very gratifying to know that I produced this with my own two hands. I built this thing, or I produced this garden or this orchard or whatever that's now feeding my family, and maybe it's totally organic and non-GMO, and every bit of this process I went and put in the work for that, and I know for a fact that what I'm eating is the best quality food. It's just there's so much about that. People talk about how it's therapeutic to garden, to do these things, and how
living meditation.
It like feeds your soul,
Yeah.
So,
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll add one. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sean.
Okay, I'll add one more thing, is that giving the ability to give your children work is so important, and I've seen that as a huge blessing. And some kids may not see it that way, of course, but they're getting this work ethic. They're gaining these skills that and nothing against anyone else, but that 97% of Americans don't have.
Yeah.
The fact that they can process an animal, that they can grow food from the ground, that they can fell a tree, they can do all these things. And again, it doesn't have to be those types of skills, but any type of skills that are just lost in our society. It's a huge benefit, and it's a huge benefit. And I will say one more thing, is that to the person that is in the job and they just can't break away yet, or maybe they want to eventually, that doesn't mean like, okay, well, I'm in the rat race, so there's no hope for me. No, there's still a lot that person can do. They can still achieve some level of self-sufficiency. They can still achieve a level of community, even if they're working a job. I mean, you got to start where you're at and, do what you can.
I have a lot of friends that are still stuck in the city and literally stuck. They want to come out and be free and live that whole lifestyle, but they're so mired in debt, and then as a result of their unhappiness of being in debt, they spend more money and get more in debt, and most of them seem like they've just kind of given up, like they don't think this is a realistic something that they can attain in their lifetime. And it's one of those things, it's not easy to break away. It's difficult, but the rewards are huge. Do you have any motivating words or technical points to help somebody to just break out of it and do what they want to do?
All right, excellent. Well, Sean, thank you so much for joining us here today. We do appreciate it. We're going to get into that question, that very question that Lance just asked, on the next podcast, so stay tuned for that. Thank you so much.